The man in the Grinch cleats is in the midst of a Joker origin story. Welcome to Snap Judgments, the last version of Snap Judgments in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center before we head to Los Angeles for the Rose Bowl, Ohio State and Oregon on New Year's Day. That's Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. Jeremiah Smith, wearing some Grinch cleats. Pretty cool. Chip Kelly decided to grace us with that knowledge. And he also has some Joker pads that we saw earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And now he's not the freshman of the year. And I don't think that people love that idea in this building.
Doesn't seem like it. I think Jeremiah Smith was he was cordial about the fact that he did not win Freshman of the Year. Emeka Ibuka said it was a little fuel to the fire. Chip Kelly seemed rather surprised that Jeremiah Smith, one that they gave away a Freshman of the Year, and then once he realized that Jeremiah Smith was not the person who won that award. No disrespect to Colin Simmons from Texas, he's also a good player, but Jeremiah Smith is certainly different, and he was by far the talk of Saturday's offensive media day here at the Woody.
Yeah, and I don't know that should come as any great surprise to anybody. He is really the player who will determine, I think, the ceiling for Ohio State offensively, and he would for any team in the country. You know, he was dominant against Tennessee. I think the personality that he's showing is reflective of the confidence that he has in himself, which was never lacking, but it is a welcome reminder in some respects that he is just a true freshman, that he is only 18 years old and he is still getting better, not just on the field where you saw that and slicing up the Volunteers in the first round of the playoff, but the way he carries himself, the way he's talking about the game. He's always been mature in all those ways. I'm not suggesting that he wasn't, but you're also seeing him continue to grow right now, which is, I would think, a scary thought.
I wouldn't love it if I was charged with trying to stop him. It seems like it'd be rather difficult. I really loved what he said about I guess it might have been maybe the week before the Tennessee game, or right around senior tackle time. He said he went to Brian Hartline and said, "I want to be challenged." And I think another way to spin that, and this is me saying it, not Jeremiah, was like, I want you to put this game on my shoulders. Like, I feel like I'm ready for this. And yes, that came on the heels of a Michigan game where none of the receivers were involved, obviously, as much as they could have been or should have been, but it was maybe most noticeable with Jeremiah. And then they came out and he had 6 catches for whatever it was against Tennessee and the 2 touchdowns. They moved him around a lot. They got him the ball in some different spots. And I think that will continue. And I think that's why he projected, I guess I would say the most confidence. He's to your point, he's always projected confidence, but I thought this was the most comfortable, like discussing his role on the team and his importance to the offense that maybe Jeremiah has been this year. And that makes sense. Like he's had his feet under him for a while. Clearly he's played very well, but I think that ability to carry yourself that way and say some of the things he said the way that he said them does take time for any freshman, even when you are a generational one, talent-wise, the way that Jeremiah Smith is. But yeah, I'm if we're to extrapolate a lot from vibes, my vibe coming off of Saturday is like Jeremiah Smith once again expects to be a pretty big part of this game plan in the Rose Bowl. He was against Tennessee, and he was the last time they played Oregon. So why would that be any different?
Yeah, I don't remember Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith-Njigba or Chris Olave or Marvin Harrison or even Emeka Ibuka ever say something like, when would you consider yourself not open if the entire team is covering me? And that's such a cool thing to be able to say. I bet it's pretty fun to be Jeremiah. It didn't feel like it was like a brag or like unnecessarily egotistic. It was just sort of a statement of fact. Like, I think it's true. But there is another way that you can stop him, which is to interfere and get away with it and not get the call. I kind of thought he was going to answer the question this way, but I wanted to at least pose it to him to get that answer on the record, which is like, which irritates you more, not getting a pass interference call or not being able to make the catch? And he said, yeah, it hit my hands, so I still should have caught it, which, he was being pretty dramatically interfered with. So it's okay that he didn't, but not to him.
I think he's always struck the right balance of saying things confidently, like it'll take the whole team to cover me, or he said he laughs inside his head a little bit when he sees himself matched up with a linebacker, which happened a couple times against Tennessee. But he's never, I don't think he ever puts I don't want to call it mistakes, but I guess any unsuccessful play on that is targeted to him on anyone other than himself. So as long as he continues to balance those two things, and then I love the way that he talks about the impact that he's able to have on games. But no, it's not surprising in the least that he would lean more on, like, I should catch it if the ball's in my hands rather than, getting interfered with or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, this may seem relatively obvious. He's going to have to be a key figure in the Rose Bowl. Is it that simple that he is the most important player in this game? Because you, Bill, like you were talking to Emeka, you talked to Chip Kelly about some of the stuff. Like Emeka was a major part of the first matchup, made some clutch plays, and they would have been, again, that game could have been remembered differently for, the one he made on the final drive. I remember leaving Eugene thinking that just brief glimpse of him as a rushing threat, just 2 carries in that game, just 2 carries, like probably could have been more, or maybe even should have been more. I know it's a collective effort. You're trying to win the quarterfinal. You're trying to win the Rose Bowl. You're trying to beat undefeated Big Ten champion. So it feels like if Oregon reacts to what happened a week ago, this may well be a game that Emeka becomes just as critical as the first time around.
Yeah, it could be. So he had 12 touches in that game, 2 carries, 10 receptions. I think it was 9 receptions for Jeremiah. So they both got pretty heavily involved. I'd imagine Oregon's game plan might mimic the Michigan one, where Michigan, I think, played with 2 high safeties, did a nice job of diverting resources to both Jeremiah and Emeka because it had trusted its 2 very talented defensive tackles to just kind of hold up at the point of attack to handle whatever numbers advantage Ohio State might have running the ball. And Oregon's got good tackles too. I don't think they're quite as good as Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, but they are good. I mean, saw the impact that Derek Harmon can have the last time they played. So I'm very curious to see how Oregon elects to play that. It was somewhat surprising in the Tennessee game to see how often they left Jeremiah one-on-one. I don't know that he'll see a whole lot.
Sometimes that's too much faith in having an all SEC corner.
I don't know that he'll see a whole lot of that moving forward, but I think Ohio State is probably better equipped to adapt to a game plan now if they do see something similar to Michigan this time around in terms of scheme. But yeah, if it's Jeremiah who gets more attention, then Emeka stands to have a big game. Like they are 2 of the more dynamic players in all of college football, and like we know that about Jeremiah, and he gets a lot of fanfare. Emeka is still, in my opinion, flies under the radar a little too much, but with his versatility and his ability to be explosive and track the ball down the field and be dangerous on short stuff, like there are a lot of ways you can get both these guys involved, and I don't think Ohio State will leave any stone unturned when it comes to finding ways to put the game plan on Jeremiah and Emeka.
So this offensive media day for Ohio State was interesting on a number of fronts, but we heard from Chip Kelly, Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, and Quinshon Judkins. It's like for all of them talking about this not being a revenge game, that the motivation is to win a national championship. This is the next opponent in the way. It is not about, erasing what happened in October. There's so much to take from that first matchup, and especially for Quinshon Judkins with the fumble, Will Howard with, the way that game ended. He said he still had nightmares about it and the way that it ended. Like there's conversation to be had where specific plays and individual moments keep coming up, and the collective of that game I think sometimes gets overlooked. Yeah, I mean, Quinshon Judkins is responsible for a turnover. Will Howard has had a couple of moments that he would want back in that. You look at, the second half and Chip Kelly being asked about not being able to run the football or get a first down on the ground. Like they had to have so many things go against them to lose that game. That's not to dismiss what, the first couple parts of that for Will Howard or Quinshon Judkins, but any of those guys are going to have moments when they look back on the film, which Will Howard said he's done countless times for that particular game. And boy, if they're just one thing better, one play better, then that outcome is completely reversed and maybe even widely reversed.
I think it's a situation where Ohio State knows, at least offensively, that it took a pretty good swing at Oregon and ended up losing by a point on the road, but it didn't take its best swing against Oregon. And now it feels, I think, confident that it will find that level. And it's different for everybody. Like I thought it was interesting the way that Will Howard sort of described a little bit more in detail how that play at the end of that game has weighed on him, maybe not the right word, but he has not removed it from his mind. He has used it to motivate him to get back to this point. Whereas Quinshon Judkins said, I kind of moved on from that fumble. And Emeka Egbuka said, nameless, faceless opponent kind of thing. So it's whatever kind of personality you are, I guess it depends on which thing you tend to grab onto when you're looking for that particular spark of motivation. But Will Howard also said that they've been playing the game on a loop in the Woody too. So I think there is the whole thing revenge. No, I don't think so, because in reality, that loss in Eugene didn't really knock Ohio State off of whatever path it was hopeful to be on. Obviously, the game against Michigan did that more. So I think it maybe matters a little bit more than I initially wondered when that matchup first came on the board because of what Will Howard said, but I think it's circumstantial, and some guys will grab onto it and others won't.
I think we were in here Friday for defensive media day, and it's like, well, clearly Ohio State played its worst game on that side of the football. The Silver Bullets then had to spend 2 weeks rebuilding, re-engineering the entire thing. Like, there may be some element of revenge and retribution for them, but I hadn't really considered that as much for the offense, because I thought the offense played a very good game against a talented defense on the road, and like had a couple things with the Jeremiah Smith pass interference call, bogus pass interference call in my opinion, and then the late game situation, even the 12-man penalty that Oregon took, what appeared to be on purpose to exploit the rules and milk the clock. Like, all that stuff had to work against them. So I guess I didn't feel like that would be the case for Ohio State offensively, but as you said, like, maybe for Will Howard, maybe not for Quinshon Judkins, but you look at overall, there's going to be guys that feel like they have to do something better than they did against Oregon before and want to do it against Oregon.
Yeah, I don't think it was, if I put a grade on it, thinking back on it, it was probably like a B plus A kind of game for the offense, but we know what an A plus game looks like for the offense. We just saw it a couple days ago against Tennessee, and it was just that I think it's a combination of coming up a little bit short against Oregon with how well they played against Tennessee. Like, that was by far the best running the ball, passing the ball they've looked. Like, the balance, the explosion, the creativity, like, it was all on full display. So when you nail it the way that they nailed it against Tennessee, and then you think back, like, man, what if we would have nailed it in Eugene? You get a little more fired up, I guess, to go put that on the field against the Ducks second time.
Yeah. What did you think was the most interesting takeaway on Saturday in the Woody?
It's a good question. Maybe the offensive line conversation remains interesting to me. You asked Chip Kelly about the 3-guard rotation, and he kind of echoed what Ryan Day said, that they thought it went really well and that they'll continue to do it. And then, but the guy that Chip Kelly chose to single out was Luke Montgomery, which definitely caught my ear. And maybe that's, and that's not to say that Tegra Chabot and Austin Saraville didn't play well, because I think all three of them did, but I'm still curious about like exactly what that game meant for Luke. And I think we will continue to see that rotation, at least at the start of the game. But again, it'll be a spot where if anything looks awry early on, maybe they'll deviate from it. And I don't know, given Austin Saraville is maybe, not 100% healthy, and Tegra of the three has been perhaps the most inconsistent. Maybe Luke Montgomery has made like a real surge kind of up that up that offensive line depth chart to become a guy that, despite only playing one game, really has earned a lot of trust from the coaching staff.
I do think there's an element where it has, if you look at each of those three cases because it seems to me, and I asked Chip Kelly this, and it's like, you're probably not going to get a real clear answer. Like, this must be, in their mind, more of a necessity than a desire, because you did it in a playoff game, you did it against a talented SEC defensive front. And I guess I'd never really framed it in my mind in those terms. Like, because Tegra is inconsistent, asking him to play 60 plus snaps could lead to some rough moments. Austin Saraville is banged up. He played the most of those three, but asking him to take 15 or 20 more snaps, what could that have looked like physically? And Luke Montgomery is doing this for the first time. And, do you want to go from nothing on your plate to a full buffet of an entire game? Like, that could be a lot to ask, and you'd be, maybe exposed in that. So I guess I'd never really thought about that going into Tennessee, that you do recognize that injuries and performance have pushed them into this spot, but then even the way that they managed it, like, they may have had no choice, or felt like they had no choice but to do it that way. And ideally you would want to pick two and be able to roll the whole way through, but that's the pros and cons maybe that Ohio State had to think about. I think they really did a nice job with that against Tennessee, and I can understand why that would be appealing now to continue that, and how it would work not just for the coaching staff, but for each of those three players to put them in the best spot against Oregon.
It was interesting that Chip Kelly mentioned like keeping those guys fresh, because it's not, you just don't normally have those kind of conversations about offensive linemen. You do it a lot with defensive linemen. Maybe there's something like Tegra is a pretty big dude. Like, maybe there's something that if you do put 60 something snaps on his plate by the end of the game, he's worn down a little bit. I do think, I haven't looked at like PFF grades or whatever, but I would say, at least anecdotally, the games where Tegra has rotated, I think he has tended to play better. Now, some of that coincides with playing, non-conference games too. So I'm aware of that. But then he did it against Tennessee as well. I thought that was the best he's played in probably a month and a half, 2 months. So it's rather unorthodox. You don't see it a whole lot, but given their current situation with the health and, Tiger is still an inexperienced offensive lineman who's learning a lot of things. It's the first time starting. So if rotating puts him in a better frame of mind and gets you 30 snaps of B plus or better play, as opposed to getting that and then getting 20 or so snaps of like C minus or worse, then I think you'll take that trade off and just hope that it can continue to persist for them. Because I was shocked by how well it worked against Tennessee. But if it can work in that game, like why couldn't it work in every game moving forward?
Yeah, it's a matchup that Ohio State knows. I mean, they know what they're facing. The personnel is going to be different with, Birch back out there at defensive end. But as you mentioned with Quinshawn and the fumbles, like Derek Harmon is a load on the inside. They have guys up front. They may not be quite to the same level as Michigan, but they're not all that far off. And they gave Ohio State real problems at times in that game, which is also why I think that performance overall still resonates as positive for the offense, because I think that is a talented Oregon defense that, they've been inconsistent, but the strength of it is certainly up front.
I think so. And I get we're saying that when the last impression we got of Oregon was Penn State running the ball for 300 yards, whatever it was, against them. But there's a body of work there that I think you have to respect for Oregon's front. Chip Kelly mentioned several times, kind of unprovoked, that Jordan Birch did not play the first time these teams played, and he will be playing in this one. He has it's 9.5 sacks in 8 games, I think. So he's been a very productive player. And in the course of him missing time, Mateo Uiagalelei has become one of the better pass rushers in college football with 10.5 sacks. And they've got some depth and athleticism, and they'll vary their fronts. They'll stunt or stem. They'll do a whole lot of stuff to confuse Ohio State's offensive line. It's helpful that Ohio State has seen that before, I guess with the exception of both Luke Montgomery and Carson Hinsman, I guess, didn't play in that game. But it'll be a challenge. I think it's a different challenge than Tennessee, but as difficult for different reasons, if that makes sense. Yeah. If not, maybe even more difficult. I know there's not a James Pierce or whatever on Oregon's defensive line, but I think like across the board, they're far more balanced at end and tackle than Tennessee was. Yeah,
that'll be one of the focus for Ohio State as they get out here on this practice field at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. They consider it a Wednesday, which the math and the days of the week don't really add up to me because the game is on a Wednesday. But I'm not meant to understand all these things that the coaching staff do. No. But they're treating it as a Wednesday. They will travel out to Los Angeles on Sunday. They'll be there around 6 p.m. Pacific time. Bill, me, Berm, we'll all be there much earlier, getting ready for the team arrival in the next few days in the final preparations for Ohio State and Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Can't wait to get out there. Looking forward to the opportunity. And then we'll see what transpires once we get there. But we're done here in Columbus, and we're heading out to Southern California. Thanks for joining us on Snap Judgments. He is Bill. I am Austin. We'll see you in California.